it's time for my October wrap-up video. I somehow managed to read 40 books in October. Belly, why are you leaving? I'm offended. So that was mainly because I participated in the Hogwarts House Cup readathon that was being held on Bookstagram. It motivated me to read a lot more than usual because I wanted to win. So without further ado, let's get to the books I read in October. The first book I read was Rebel by Marie Lu. I had been really looking forward to this. I gave it 3 stars, which is fine, but the original trilogy, Legend, I gave them all 4 stars. So this was not my favorite. I can't spoil anything, so that restricts what I can say about it. But basically, the thing that bothered me at the end of Champion could have been made up by what happened in this, and I didn't feel like it was enough. Like, I still feel like what happened at the end of Champion didn't need to happen. But I'm not going to spoil anything. And it also, it's a personal thing. I think some people would be totally fine with the end of Champion. It's just me. But anyway, this was 3 stars. It was my first read. I enjoyed it fine, but I didn't love it. The next book I read was on audio, and it was The Haunting of Hill House. I had really wanted to read this because I really enjoyed the Netflix TV series thing. The book I didn't like as much, which is interesting because usually books are better. But for things like this that are more adult and not as current, I do usually prefer the movie adaptations because they're more entertaining. Plus, this is nothing like the TV series. And I prefer the TV series. It's interesting, but I liked how they changed things for the Netflix series, and I really recommend it. It's really, really good. So the next book I read was Writing the Fiction series by Karen S. Weisner. I actually only gave this 2 stars. It was more like the pros and cons of writing a series instead of actually how to write a series. The worksheets at the back are kind of helpful, but other than that, this just wasn't really what I was looking for. Next, I listened to Dracula on audio. I just felt like that was a good October read, and I'd never read it before, and I feel like you have to read that at some point in your life. I enjoyed it well enough. I gave it 2 stars, which is pretty typical for classics just because those aren't my kind of thing. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. Then I listened to Tuck Everlasting. I remember loving this when I was a kid, and I just felt like rereading it because first of all, it was really short, so it was going to be helpful for my readathon. But second of all, this has been made into a musical, and I'm very into musical theater, so I was like, I have to check this out. I didn't expect to like it because I was like, anything I liked as a kid I'm gonna have grown out of. I loved it, guys. This is phenomenal. I gave it 4 stars. This is such a good story. It's so good. The themes are dealt with really well, and they're just beautiful. It's really well done and so powerful, and at the end I teared up, which is weird, but I was just like, this is so good. But I'm not emotional, so that doesn't usually happen. I also listened to A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was also a reread, and again, I was looking for something short for the readathon. But I really love some of Shakespeare's stuff. Romeo and Juliet is my favorite. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I love Romeo and Juliet. I love it. I felt like rereading this, and it was really cool because on audio it's got a full cast. It just sounds like you're listening to a play, so that was very enjoyable. Quick little read. I also listened to Wink Poppy Midnight, which I did not have high hopes for because of some of the things I'd heard, but I actually enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. It was just very interesting because it was very messed up. I think what helped is I knew going into it that it would be kind of messed up, but it was, I think, really well done. It was very intriguing. I didn't really know what was going on. The characters were so different than characters you usually read about. They're just really out of this world crazy. Their names are Wink, Poppy, and Midnight. So obviously they're gonna be some weirdos. The day that this came out, I read Reveal Me, which was the second one in here. So this is the thing that puts together both of the novellas. So these are the Kenji novellas from Shatter Me, and Shatter Me is my favorite series. So I read Reveal Me. I'd already read Shadow Me. I enjoyed it, of course, because why wouldn't I? I'm very excited for Imagine Me, but also sad that it's going to be the last one. I listened to Misery on audio because I'm trying to slowly get through some Stephen King stuff, and that one was interesting. I gave it 2 stars, but it's kind of more like a 2.5. For Stephen King, I think the most that I could ever give a book is 3 stars because it's not my genre, but I'm still interested in reading them. I know my rating system can be weird. I posted a video earlier about my rating system. I can put a link below in the description. That'll help explain a little bit what I'm talking about, because I know 2.5 stars doesn't sound like I enjoyed it, but I did. And then I ended up watching the movie later in the month and enjoyed that as well. But so far, my favorite Stephen King novel is still Pet Sematary, but Misery might be like a second favorite. Maybe? I don't know. I might be making that up. I managed to get to the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy this month, which I had been really excited about. I gave the first book 4 stars and the last 2 books 3 stars. I didn't love it as much as I had hoped to. The first half of the first book was like 5 stars for me. I really enjoyed that. But like about halfway through, when like you understand what's actually going on, things just take a turn. And whoops, my books fell over. And that turn is like the plot, and that's what's so like interesting about the book to most people. But I preferred the vibe from the first half of the first book than what was the whole rest of the series. So I still enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it as much. I just much preferred this. My favorite ship in this is definitely Mick and Zuzana. I love them so much, which is why this was a 4-star read. So good. So this is a little novella about Mick and Zuzana. I read this after reading all 3 books, but I think you can read it between 2 and 3 if you want to. It's super adorable, and it's got a bunch of illustrations inside, as well as this awesome artwork on the like outside. But it's got a bunch of art throughout. So it's really cool, and I really, really enjoyed this. Next, I read The Boneless Mercies. I enjoyed this. I gave it 3 stars. It is a gender-swapped retelling of Beowulf, which was interesting. I haven't read Beowulf since high school, and I, of course, did not enjoy it because it's so weird. But I enjoyed this. I thought it was fun. I just liked the plot. I thought it was interesting. It wasn't anything like super memorable or super interesting or super exciting, but I did enjoy it, and I gave it, it was an easy 3 stars. Next, I listened to Ready Player One, even though I clearly own the physical copy, but I listened to it because I'd heard that it's a good audiobook, and also this isn't like the kind of thing that I would pick up for myself necessarily just because it's so video gamey, and I'm just not a video game person, and I'm really, really glad that I did listen to it, because I think that it would have been harder for me to get through because it's like really dense and really, really like you gotta know your video game stuff. And so on audio it was more enjoyable than it would have been physically, I think. I gave that one 2 stars. I haven't seen the movie yet. I read this because my brother has been begging me to watch the movie, and I'm like, wait, I gotta read the book first. And so he gave me the book for like my birthday or Christmas or something. That was basically him saying, you better freaking watch this movie with me. So I'm excited to watch the movie. I hope it's good. I also listened to Heart-Shaped Box on audio. That one was 1 star. I wish I didn't read it. So I read it because while I was reading Save the Cat, which is right here, but where are you guys going? I'm going to talk about Save the Cat in a little bit. But while I was reading that, it goes through and each chapter tells you what it'll have spoilers for. And one of the chapters said it would have spoilers for Heart-Shaped Box. And I had seen that that was recommended to me as like a horror novel. But the reason I kind of wish I didn't read it is it was a little too demonic for me. I'm not into demonic horror. So I just didn't enjoy it. I just didn't. I get that it's like well plotted or whatever, like it was mentioned in Save the Cat, which was an amazing book. It wasn't like it was too scary, it's just it was too demonic, and I do not feel comfortable reading that kind of stuff. So I kind of regret my decision to read that. Also, here are my inkbox tattoos for the current time. So this one says free, and then the other one I did was the Disney Castle. I hope you can see this. Can you see this? The Disney Castle. I've been wanting to do this because look how cute. That's how cute. It's Disney. So the next book I finished was The Anatomy of Story. I gave this one only 2 stars. I know I've heard so many raves about it. I expected more from it because people are always like, even though it's meant for the screen, like it's for script writers, that it is like so good for like novelists. And I just didn't necessarily agree. So basically I felt like it was dense, and a lot of the script writing techniques I didn't feel like actually did translate over to novel writing, and some of the stuff he said I straight up didn't agree with. On Goodreads I actually wrote that I think is more like a 1.5 stars, so I had really high expectations for this, so that's kind of disappointing. I wouldn't deter you from reading this if you want to, because there are, like, it's very highly rated. It has a 4.28 on Goodreads, which is really good, and that's, like, it's read by a lot of people, so I'm, like, in the minority here. So don't not read it just because I didn't like it. So I gave only 2 books 5 stars this month, and this is one of them. Save the Cat writes a novel. I'm so glad I finally got to this. It was so helpful. It was awesome. The original Save the Cat is about script writing. So Jessica Brody, a young adult author, made a version that is more tailored to novelists. And I thought it was absolutely perfect. And first of all, since she's a YA author, she references so many YA books in here, which not a lot of writing books do. And so that was amazing. You're so weird. Stop licking your foot. So this was by far one of the most helpful writing books I've ever read. Every bit of the information was helpful, and I'm going to use this for plotting every single book from now on. Her guidelines in here are so detailed and helpful. I can't put this back on my shelf. I'm gonna have to have it sitting out so that I can turn to it again and again and again, because this is just so helpful. So this was absolutely 5 stars. So next, we've actually got my other 5-star read from the month, which was The Bone Houses. I didn't expect to like this as much as I did. It's about zombies, so I thought it was gonna be creepy. It's not creepy, so if you're afraid of creepy, don't worry. It's zombies, but it's like also it's a really like wholesome, funny, lighthearted, adorable book. It was such a unique take on zombies. Like, that blew my mind. I love the 2 main characters, Rin and Ellis, and the goat. It was really well written. I just really enjoyed the adventure that was this book, and it was an easy 5 stars, so this is now one of my favorites. Next, I listened to Providence by Caroline Kepnes. I had appropriate expectations, I think, because I enjoyed her book You, but I heard that Providence isn't as good, and it wasn't. I gave it 2 stars, but it wasn't like a it was more like a it was okay kind of 2 stars. I enjoyed it, but didn't like love it. So I really enjoyed Slasher Girls and Monster Boys, which I read during the first half of October. It's an anthology of stories that are all like kind of horror-ish, and some of like my favorite authors are in here, and some that you'll be very familiar with. There's Jay Kristoff, Leigh Bardugo, Marie Lu, Megan Shepard. Like, there's some awesome authors in here, and I really enjoyed the stories. My favorite ones were In the Forest, Dark and Deep by Carrie Ryan, which was a retelling of Alice in Wonderland and super creepy and awesome. The Flicker, the Fingers, the Beat, the Sigh by April Genevieve Tuchok, or however you pronounce that. It was just so messed up. I'm looking at my Goodreads thing, so if it sounds like I'm reading from my Goodreads review, I am. So it was about what a group of friends does when they get in a car accident with a fellow student and kill her. I really liked how twisted it was, and how like every character was a little messed up, and it was super interesting. And then Sleepless by Jay Kristoff. That one blew my mind. So at first I was thinking I rated it like 2 stars because it was the really immature like instant messaging was kind of annoying and a little unrealistic, and I didn't know where it was going. But then there was a plot twist. How do you plot twist in a short story? How do you do that? You do that when you're Jay Kristoff. I gasped out loud so many times. The plot twist blew my mind. Like, some of the best plot twists in anything, and this was in a short story, so I really enjoyed that, and I'm blown away, and I don't know why I didn't expect it to be so mind-blowing, because it's Jay Kristoff. Next, I read Writing Fiction for All You're Worth. This was helpful. I gave it 3 stars, but it had a lot of repeated information because the entire book is just a culmination of a bunch of his like blog posts. But overall, I enjoyed this and thought it was helpful. Next, I listened to Forgotten God by Francis Chan. I loved his book, Crazy Love. This one I gave 4 stars. I had to take a little break because the guy to come fix our heating downstairs got here, so I had to deal with that. If the angle or the lighting is different, that's why. So next I read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I know this is a very anticipated one for most people, so I did this much physically, and then I switched to audio, and I anticipated that, and I heard the audio was good, so I didn't have a problem with that. Basically, the only reason I read this was because I love Leigh Bardugo and wanted to support her, and also wanted to like you know, on the off chance that I liked it, I wanted to give it a try. As a very, like, adult book, I knew it probably wasn't going to be my kind of thing, and it wasn't. I gave it 2 stars. I can totally see why people like it. I can tell that it's a good book. It just personally wasn't my thing. So for me, it was just okay. I also listened to Bird Box, which I had been anticipating, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. Soon after listening to the book, I watched the movie, and it was so good. I'd heard somebody who, like, didn't like it, and so I didn't expect to like it, but I thought it was so good. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was much better than the book, even. The movie was like a 4.5 stars, and the book was like 3 stars. If you don't know, it's kind of like A Quiet Place, only instead of you have to be quiet or else the monsters get you, it's you can't look at the monsters or else you die. I thought the movie was so well done. I thought it was very interesting. The changes that they made, I thought were absolutely appropriate, made so much sense, were awesome, were so cool. And the movie made me cry. I've never cried in a horror movie before, so it, like, had other dimensions than just horror. Like, there were some things that were touching. Like, I grew really close to some characters, so it was not, like, surface level horror that, like, a lot of things are. It was really, really, really good, and I really enjoyed it, and I loved it. Next, I did an audio reread of House of Salt and Sorrows, even though I just read this for the first time in September, or August. No, it was August, wasn't it? But I was ready for a reread. It was the October read from my book club, and so I was like, I'll refresh myself. That's my excuse. But basically, as soon as I finished reading this, I was ready for a reread, so I was like, audiobook time. The audiobook was really good. I, of course, loved it just as much as I did the first time. This is a 5-star read. I recommend it to everyone. It's deliciously creepy, has awesome plot twists, so well written. Love everything about it. Next, I read The Last Draft. I picked it up because I'm getting near the last draft of my current work in progress, and it's called The Last Draft, so I thought it would be about last drafts. It wasn't. It was about starting out revisions, like the revision process. It wasn't about the last draft. It was just a regular revision book, but it was also very much for pantsers. Most of the advice it gave was stuff that I do beforehand because I'm a plotter. And so I just felt like it was just a regular old revision book for pantsers. So wouldn't necessarily recommend it for plotters unless you want to read it to help you outline. Basically, if you're a pantser and your first draft is a discovery draft, this book may be very helpful for you to read as you begin to tackle revisions. I just had the wrong expectations. I mean, it's called The Last Draft. Shouldn't it be about the last draft? So anyway, I gave this one 2 stars. So I finally got to rereading The Forest of Hands and Teeth, and I also read the second book, which is The Dead Tossed Waves. It's a trilogy, and the third book will be my first read of November, probably. It's zombies, but there's, like, one zombie that is fast, and they're like, why is this zombie fast? So that's basically the plot, and it's pretty cool. I love the idea. Rereading it, I gave this 3 stars. It originally was, like, one of my favorites as a kid, and by kid I mean, like, middle school. I wasn't reading this when I was, like, 3. This was 3 stars. It was enjoyable, but not, like, as mind-blowing as I remember it being. And then the second book I gave 2 stars. So I gave this 2 stars the first time I read it, a long, long time ago. So these are all kind of companion novels. I think you do need to read them in order, but, like, this has some characters from the first book, but it's not a continuation. It takes place, like, many years later. The reason it's 2 stars, so at first I was like, oh, this is fine. This will be 3 stars just like the first one. And I mean, it's kind of like a 2.5. I love the idea of the world, and I admire how the author really does not let up on her characters, like, conflict-wise. But what bumped my rating down for this one was the romance, which is weird because usually romance is my thing. Like, books that don't have romance in them, I tend to not like as much. But the romance in here was a love triangle with, like, Twilight level stupidity. So it was really, that got on my nerves. It was literally like, we almost kiss and everything is perfect, and then suddenly he's pushing me away and it feels like everything in the world is going to end. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And this is with 2 different boys. First of all, you're dealing with the zombie apocalypse. You don't need to be dealing with 2 different boys right now. I just, it felt like drama for the sake of drama, and it did not, it was unappealing, and I was like, why? Besides that, I enjoyed it. The twists were good. I liked what it added to the first book. Like, we get to learn more about, like, the return, which is what they call basically the apocalypse. And we get to learn, like, what happened to the characters in the first book, which was cool. So overall, it was cool. It's just that the main character, Gabri, was a little too Bella Swan for my taste. Next, I read Troubleshooting Your Novel by Stephen James. I loved this one. This was 5 stars. It was really, really good. I would recommend it to every writer. It's for revisions, but I think if you're a plotter, you can easily use this during the plotting process. It just takes you through, like, all the things that are really important to be in a book. It explains them really well, and I thought it was phenomenal and very, very helpful. So I would definitely recommend this. Next, I finally read the Diviners trilogy, which I was excited about. Oh, it's not a trilogy, I lied, because it has one more book coming out. But I finally read these, which was exciting. I thought they would be perfect for October, and they were. I gave them all 3 stars, except, actually, yeah, I gave the final book, I gave Before the Devil Breaks You, I gave that 4 stars. So I enjoyed them, which was cool because usually historical novels do not do it for me. But it's just so interesting, and also it has a lot of characters and jumps back and forth a lot, so that's kind of disorienting sometimes. The 3rd book was my favorite so far, and I'm definitely excited for King of Crows coming out next year. I enjoyed it. It's set in the 1920s, and it's about, like, ghosts and diviners who are people who have powers. Like, the main character, Evie, can, like, read things from an object. Like, she can see memories tied to that object. It's really cool concept for sure, and definitely entertaining, and I really enjoyed the 3rd book, so I'm excited to see what the 4th book holds. I did an audio reread of the House of Dark Shadows series. I read all but the last book, so that's 5 because it's 6 total. The last book I'm currently listening to and will finish today, which is November 1st when I'm filming this. I've given them all 2 stars so far. That's not a bad thing because I think they're listed as young adult, but they really hug the line between middle grade and young adult because, first of all, I mean, the oldest of the main characters is 15 and the youngest is 9. But it focuses more on the 12-year-old and the 15-year-old. So it's definitely kind of between middle grade and young adult, so it can feel like middle grade. But I enjoy the story. I think it's interesting. I loved this series when I was younger. I'm enjoying the nostalgia of it. It's an interesting concept, and I love that it's not like a Christian series, but the family is casually just a Christian family. Like, they're a Christian family, but it's not an overtly Christian book series, and I really like that. So basically it's about this family that moves into this house that they at first think is haunted, but then discover it's not like haunted. It's more like the house has portals to other worlds, not like other worlds, but like to the past. So like they can jump into different parts of the past, but it's all really dangerous and scary and all this kind of stuff. So it's super interesting. I haven't heard of another series like it. So I definitely recommend it if you're into like middle grade / young YA stuff. The last audiobook I finished in October was The Man God Has for You. This was 1 star. I kind of hated it. I was looking forward to it because I like to listen to nonfiction things on the Christian life, and this one made me angry. So let me explain. While there was some advice in here that was good, I'd heard it before. My main problem with this is I do not believe it was rooted in the gospel. First of all, the author straight out says that he has not read the whole Bible. I know it's like a big book. People who aren't believers may not understand like my problems with this, but basically I feel like the author doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't feel like he actually understands the Christian faith. He has a very surface level view of it. But when you read the whole Bible, when you really truly get to work on your relationship with God, you learn a lot of things that you can't know just surface level. And I feel like he only has a surface level relationship, which I know sometimes I can come across as judgmental, and I'm really trying not to do that because I'm not trying to talk about him. I'm talking about how the book, I expected it to be rooted in the gospel, and it wasn't. And so there were some things that were, if he'd read the whole Bible, he would probably not have written in there because he'd understand that the Bible actually says stuff that contradicts what he's saying. So I did not enjoy it. His main point of the book is that women have to take steps to find the man God has for them and that God will not intervene. I get him saying, like, we can't just sit around and wait for things to happen to us, that we do have to be active. I get that, but he went farther than that, was more like, God won't intervene, so you have to do the work. And that's not the case, because God does intervene. He is very active in our lives. I disagreed with so much in this book. I was very disappointed. I think that if you're gonna write a book about like advice for Christian people, you need to have it be rooted in the gospel, because if it's not, and if it contradicts the gospel, it's not legit. And finally, I read Second Sight by Cheryl B. Klein, and this was 3.5 stars for me. I thought it was really helpful. It was a culmination of some blog posts and some talks she's given. She's an editor, and so she has authority on the subject. There was some like repetition because it was like blog posts and talks where she talked about some of the similar stuff, but it didn't bother me because it wasn't too much, and the information she did have was super helpful, and so I really enjoyed this one, and I thought it was good. So those are all 40 books that I read in October. I have no idea how I did that, honestly. That's never happened in my life, and may not happen again unless it happens in November, because I'm also competing in a readathon. Please let me know down below what your reading was like in October. I hope you had a good reading month, whether that means that you were happy that you got just one book done, or whether you got like a million done. Like, as long as you're happy with what you read, that's what matters. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again on Friday.